The fluorescent lights in Mr. Holloway's office had always buzzed too loud. I noticed them every time I'd come here with my father over the years to sign the business renewal paperwork, to update his insurance policy, to handle the quiet administrative work of a man who built everything he had with his own two hands. But I had never noticed them quite like I did that Tuesday morning, when my brother walked in 17 minutes late, smelling like airport bourbon, and dropped into the chair beside me without a word of apology. My father had been gone for 3 weeks. 3 weeks since the hardware store had gone dark at 6 o'clock instead of 8, since I'd started making coffee for one in the back office, since I'd cried in the lumber aisle on a Wednesday afternoon because a customer asked where the old man was and I didn't have a better answer than gone. My brother hadn't come for the funeral. He said the flights from Phoenix were impossible that weekend. I didn't argue. Some truths don't need to be spoken out loud to be understood. Mr. Holloway cleared his throat and opened the folder on his desk. He was a small man, careful with words, the kind of lawyer who had probably seen every version of this scene play out in this same room. He looked at my brother first, then at me, and began to read. I, Raymond Douglas Mercer, being of sound mind, do hereby leave my business, Mercer's Hardware, located at 1140 Birchwood Avenue, along with the building, inventory, equipment, accounts, and all associated property, in its entirety, to my daughter, Claire Ann Mercer. The pen my brother had been clicking stopped. Furthermore, the savings account held under the business name, along with the personal savings account ending in 4,471, shall also transfer to Claire Ann Mercer. My son, Thomas Raymond Mercer, is to receive the 1,987 Ford pickup currently stored in the back lot, along with my collection of fishing rods. My brother's chair scraped back from the table. Not dramatically, not like a man standing to fight, more like a man whose body reacted before his mind could catch up. He pressed both palms flat on the desk and leaned forward, and for a second he looked so much like our father that something in my chest tightened. Then he opened his mouth, and the resemblance ended. "That's it?" he said. "A truck and some fishing poles." Mr. Holloway did not flinch. "That is correct, Mr. Mercer. That store is worth—" My brother stopped, recalibrated. "Dad built that store from nothing. I grew up in that store. That's our family's legacy." And he just handed it to her like it's a gift card. I folded my hands in my lap and said nothing. "Thomas," Mr. Holloway said, "your father was quite deliberate in his instructions. He anticipated, I want a copy of that will. Every page, and I want the date it was signed, because I have questions about his mental state in his final." "He was sharp until the end," I said quietly. The words came out steadier than I felt. "He did the quarterly inventory 2 months ago. He remembered every SKU in that store by heart." My brother turned to look at me. His eyes were the same brown as our father's, as mine. Genetics are funny that way. They give you the same raw material, and let circumstance decide what to do with it. "You did this," he said. "You've been working on him for years. Little sister, always so devoted, always so present. You turned him against me." I thought about all the Sundays I'd spent in that store. All the Saturday mornings I'd gone in early to accept a delivery because my father's back was bad. The winter his furnace broke, and I drove 40 minutes in a snowstorm to get him a space heater because he wouldn't ask for help. The medical appointments I'd rescheduled my own life around. The Christmas he spent in the hospital with pneumonia. And I slept in the chair beside his bed for 4 nights because he was afraid. And he would never say so. But I knew. I thought about all of that, and I didn't say a word of it out loud. Instead, I reached into my bag. "Dad left something else," I said. "He asked me to bring it here, specifically. He said to read mine first, then the one for the family." "What letter?" my brother said. I pulled out the envelope. My name on the front in my father's blocky, hardware man, handwriting. Block letters, pressed hard, like everything he did. Inside, a second envelope marked for Thomas, and a sticky note in my father's hand. "Don't let him rush you, kid." I almost smiled. He knew me so well. My hands were steady as I unfolded my letter and read it aloud. "Claire, if you're reading this in front of Mr. Holloway, it means your brother showed up and is making noise. I knew he would. Some things don't change. I need you to know something before you hear the other letter. I didn't leave you the store to punish him. I left it to you because you're the only one who ever loved it the way I did. Every morning you came in early. Every evening you stayed late. Every time a customer left that store feeling taken care of, that was you. You learned this business because you wanted to, not because you had to. The store doesn't just have your fingerprints on it, it has your heart in it. Stand firm. You've always been braver than you think. All my love, Dad. P.S. Check the back of the framed photo above my desk when you get home. I left you something. The office was quiet. Outside, a truck rumbled past on Birchwood Avenue, probably heading toward the morning deliveries. Life kept moving, the way it always did. I picked up the second envelope and began to read. Thomas, I am your father, and I love you. I want you to know that before you read the rest, because this letter is not going to be easy, and I want the love to be the first thing you hear. You have been a difficult son to understand. Not because you left, I never blamed you for leaving. Young men need to find their way. But you have been gone for 14 years, and in those 14 years, you have called me on my birthday 7 times out of 14. You have visited 11 times, mostly around the holidays, mostly when you needed something. You missed my surgery in 2019 because of a conference. You missed my 75th birthday because of a trip you'd already booked. You were not there when your mother died. You said you couldn't get away from work. I have never said this out loud, and I should have. That hurt me in a way I never fully recovered from. I am not writing this to wound you. I'm writing it because I want you to understand my decision. Claire has been here, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she chose to stay. She chose this store, this town, this family. She chose me, even when I was difficult, even when I was proud and stubborn and hard to love. She asked for nothing in return. That is worth more than I can calculate. I also need you to know the full accounting. Over the years, I gave you money, not as a gift. You asked for loans, and I gave them because you are my son, and I believed you when you said you'd pay them back. I kept records, Thomas, the way I keep records of everything. 14 years, 43 separate transfers. The total is $187,000. Not $1 was ever repaid. Not one conversation was ever had about repayment. I never brought it up because I didn't want to fight, but I also cannot, in good conscience, leave you half of a business that I effectively already paid for 3 times over through those loans, while Claire received nothing but her salary. The store is hers. The decision is final. If you contest it, Mr. Holloway has the records. Every transfer, every date, every amount. I kept everything. You know I keep everything. Be better, son. Not for me, I'm gone. Be better for yourself. Dad. I folded the letter carefully and set it on the desk. My brother's face had gone through several colors during the reading. He was on a shade I didn't have a name for now. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Mr. Holloway, then at the letter, then at me. He was keeping score, he finally said. His voice had gone strange and tight. All those years, he was keeping score. He was keeping records, I said. There's a difference. He wasn't counting against you. He was protecting himself. The way he always protected everything he built. $187,000. He said the number slowly, like he was trying to make it smaller by saying it out loud. That's Claire. Some of that was for my kids, for his grandkids. He wanted to help. He wanted to help. I agreed. He always wanted to help you. That's why he did it. That's why he never said no. I paused. He also wanted to help me. He just showed it differently. My brother stood up. He straightened his jacket, a reflex. Something to do with his hands. I'm going to need time to process this. Of course, Mr. Holloway said. I'm not signing off on anything today. You're not required to sign anything, Mr. Mercer. The will is already in effect. Then I'll need to speak with my own attorney. That is absolutely your right. I watched my brother walk to the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame and looked back at me. Not with anger anymore. Or not only anger. Something more complicated. Something that looked, for a moment, almost like grief. You were always his favorite, he said. I was always there, I said. That's not the same thing as favorite. He would have loved you exactly the same if you'd shown up. He left without answering. The door clicked shut behind him. Mr. Holloway set down his pen and looked at me over his reading glasses. Your father was a thorough man. He was a hardware store owner for 40 years, I said. He believed in having the right tool for every job. I picked up my copy of the will and tucked it into my bag. He also believed in reading the instructions before you started. The old lawyer smiled. The keys to the building are in the envelope at the front desk. As of today, everything is in your name. He paused. He thought very highly of you, Miss Mercer. He told me so, the last time he came in. He said you were the best decision he ever made. I managed to hold myself together until I got to the car. Then I sat in the parking lot for a long time with my hands on the steering wheel, letting the feelings move through me. Grief and gratitude are strange neighbors. They share a wall, and sometimes you can't tell which room you're standing in. I drove to the store. The key felt different in the lock. Heavier, somehow. I stood in the doorway for a moment before I went in. The way my father always had, like he was greeting it. Not just entering it. 40 years of early mornings, of the smell of sawdust and machine oil, and the particular metallic scent of a place that had held 10,000 small emergencies and fixed every one of them. I walked through the aisles slowly. His reading glasses were still on the counter by the register, folded on top of the inventory log he'd been working on. His handwriting filled the pages: part number, quantity, supplier, date. Every column filled in, nothing missing. In his back office, above the desk, was the framed photo he'd mentioned. The two of us at a trade show in Chicago, 11 years ago. I was laughing at something off camera. He had his arm around my shoulder, and he was looking at me instead of the lens, the way he always did in photos, like whatever was in front of him was less interesting than whoever was beside him. I lifted the frame off the wall. On the back, taped flat, was an envelope. Inside was a key, a safety deposit box number at First National, and a note in his handwriting. You never asked for anything extra, so I saved extra for you. This doesn't come with instructions, you don't need them. The safety deposit box held two things: a cashier's check for $65,000 and a folded note. I put a little aside every year for the last 12 years. Told myself it was for emergencies. But you were always the emergency plan, mine, and your mother's before she passed. This is yours. No strings, no conditions, no loans. Do something you've been afraid to do. I know there's something. There always is with you. I love you, kid. I sat in the bank's small private room for a long time with that note. My father was not a man who said much. He expressed himself through things he built and things he fixed and things he showed up for. That note was the most he had ever said to me at once. And the fact that he waited until he was gone to say it was so profoundly, perfectly him that I couldn't be angry about it. I could only sit there and miss him, and be grateful, and let those two things exist together. My brother called that evening. I let it go to voicemail, then again. Then a text: we need to talk. This isn't over. Then my sister-in-law, Claire. Thomas is devastated. Your father clearly wasn't thinking clearly in his final months. This is a family matter and it needs to be handled like one. Please call us. Then my brother again. The store should be split equally. That's what's fair. That's what Dad would have wanted if he hadn't been manipulated. I read them all. I didn't respond to any of them. The next morning, I was in the store at 7, the way my father always was. I made coffee in the back office, the way he always did. In the same ancient percolator he'd refused to replace for 2 decades because it worked, and he didn't believe in replacing things that worked. I opened the inventory log to the page he'd left it on and finished the column he hadn't completed. At 9, my brother walked in. He was calmer than the day before, which meant he'd made a plan. I recognized that energy. He used to have it as a kid, before he asked our father for something he wasn't sure he'd get. I want to buy in, he said. 50%. I'll pay fair market value. We can get an appraisal, make it official, and we both walk away with something equitable. Where would you get the money? I asked. I wasn't being cruel. It was a genuine question, the kind a business partner would ask. He paused. I have investors I'm talking to, and I'd need to structure it. Thomas, I said, fair market value on this building and business, conservatively, is somewhere around $800,000. 50% is $400,000. Do you have $400,000 or access to it? His jaw tightened. That's not the point. That's exactly the point. This is a business. I'm not running a charity, and I'm not accepting an offer that isn't real. I kept my voice level. If you ever want to put together actual financing, a formal offer in writing, proof of funds, I will look at it. That's what Dad would have done. That's what I'll do. I met his eyes, but I'm not signing anything over based on a feeling that things should be different than they are. He looked around the store, the shelves our father had built by hand, the counter he'd refinished 3 times, the back wall where he'd hung a photo of every employee who'd worked there for more than 5 years. 11 photos. Mine was up there too, from when I was 26 and had just taken over the books. He loved this place, my brother said. His voice was different, quieter. He did, I said. I used to love it too. When we were kids. I know you did. I paused. You can still love it, Thomas. You don't have to own it to love it. He looked at me for a long moment. Something moved behind his eyes that I couldn't name. Then he nodded, once, and walked out. He did contact an attorney. I found out through Mr. Holloway, who called to tell me that a formal challenge had been filed on the grounds of undue influence. My brother claimed I had isolated our father from family contact and manipulated him into changing the will. My attorney, a woman named Patricia Oakes, who wore blazers, the color of autumn leaves, and did not waste words, reviewed everything Mr. Holloway sent over and called me the next morning. Your father was meticulous, she said. The documentation alone is going to make this very difficult for your brother. The loan records go back 14 years with bank statements attached. The will was witnessed by 3 people and signed 16 months before your father's death, when he was, by all accounts, completely competent. And she paused, and I could hear papers shuffling. He also had his doctor sign a letter of cognitive competency at the time of signing. He planned ahead. He always planned ahead, I said. There's one more thing, Patricia said. The doorbell camera footage your father maintained on the store and his house. Your brother is listed as visiting the property 9 times in 14 years. You are logged at over 400 visits. That's going to be very difficult to argue around in court. The case was dismissed 4 months later. The judge upheld the will without modification. My brother was ordered to pay a portion of my legal fees. Patricia called to tell me, and her voice had the particular satisfaction of a person who was very good at their job and had been given good material to work with. I didn't call my brother. I sent a text instead. The case is closed. I hope you're doing okay. If you ever want to have a real conversation, I'm here. He didn't respond for 2 weeks. Then, one morning, while I was opening the store, I got a text back. I'm sorry, not for trying. I'm sorry for the $187,000. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I stood in the doorway with my coffee and read it 3 times. It wasn't everything. It wasn't close to everything. But it was something. And my father had raised me to understand the difference between perfect and real, and to know that real was usually more useful. Thank you for saying that, I wrote back. Come by the store sometime. Not to negotiate, just to see it. 6 months after that, Tuesday morning, in Mr. Holloway's office, I sat in the back office of Mercer's Hardware, my hardware store, my name on the license now, going through the quarterly numbers. They were better than the year before. Not because I'd done anything dramatically different, but because I'd been there, which is sometimes all a business needs. I had used $40,000 of my father's gift to hire a second full-time employee, a young woman named Greta who had grown up 2 streets over and knew more about plumbing fixtures than most licensed contractors. The other $25,000 was sitting in a business account, waiting for the right thing to do with it. My father had been patient with money. I was learning to be. My brother had visited once. He stood in the middle aisle for a long time, not saying much, running his hand along the shelf edge the way our father used to do when he was thinking. He looked at the wall of photos. He looked at the photo of our father behind the register, the one I'd had enlarged and framed, because some things deserved to be made bigger. He didn't cry, but he was quiet for a long time, which, with my brother, was close to the same thing. He was a good man, Thomas said. He was, I said. He was also a thorough man. Those 2 things aren't separate. My brother looked at the photo for another moment. Then he said, You look like him. Around the eyes. I had never noticed that before, but standing there in the store, in the light that came through the same windows it had always come through, I thought maybe he was right. My father had given me a lot of things. The store, obviously. The savings, the careful records, the letter I'd read so many times the fold lines were wearing thin. But the thing I kept coming back to, the thing I thought about when I unlocked the door in the early morning quiet, was something smaller. It was the fact that he had believed, without reservation or caveat, that I could do this. He didn't leave me the store as an apology for all the times I'd been overlooked, or as a consolation prize, or out of obligation. He left it to me because he looked at me and saw someone who already knew what to do with it. Some people spend their whole lives waiting for that kind of faith, waiting for someone to see them clearly and say, without flinching, "Yes, you. Exactly you." My father didn't wait. He wrote it down. He signed it in front of witnesses. He had his doctor certify that he was of sound mind, which, and I say this with great love, was the most him thing he had ever done in his entire methodical, prepared, wonderfully stubborn life. The first frost came on a Thursday in November. I turned on the heat in the store and made coffee and opened the inventory log, and I worked until the sun went down, and then a little after. On the way out, I stopped at the wall of photos and looked at my father's face for a moment, that specific expression he always had. The one that looked like quiet certainty. I locked up and stood on the sidewalk in the cold air for a second. Above the door, in the same block letters he'd put up 37 years ago, was the name Mercer's Hardware. My name, his name, ours. I didn't change it. I never would. Some things you keep exactly as they are. Not because you can't improve them, but because they're already right. I walked to my car in the dark, and I thought about my father, who had believed in showing up and keeping records and saying the true thing even when it was late, even when he had to do it from the other side of a letter, even when he couldn't be there to see my face when I read it. I thought about the way love, real love, is often quieter than people expect. It doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it shows up in a ledger, in a camera log, in a sticky note that says, "Don't let him rush you, kid." It shows up in 400 visits, in an unlocked door at 7 in the morning, in a space heater delivered in a snowstorm to a man too proud to ask. I had shown up for my father. He had shown up for me. In the end, that was the whole story, and it needed nothing added to it.